D units up. And if D is less than 0, it's a vertical translation. D units down. If I was making a trig summary or a transformation summary, this might be how to start. So those are the two things that are vertical, correct? Which means they affect the which variable? X or Y? Y. So if I did mapping with these, remember these multiply your mapping by A, and those add or subtract your mapping by D, right? Okay, what about the B? It's with the X, even though it's not directly beside it. It's still with it because it's in the brackets, and I could distribute it in. So this B, if B is negative, I have a reflection in the y-axis. It's always in the opposite axis. So if it's with the X, it's in the y-axis. And B is positive or negative. If it's not 1, I have a horizontal stretch. By a factor of what? Not B. What always happens to the horizontal stretch?
Half of B?
1 over B.
So it flips.
It's a reciprocal, right? Currently B is over 1, right? Up there? It's B over 1. So the horizontal stretch is by a factor of 1 over B. And it's with the X, so it's about the y-axis. Yeah. Now your C helps us with what? Which kind of translation? Horizontal. And because there's that minus sign in there, your horizontal is always the opposite, right? So if we have X minus C, if we have that, that actually means X is greater than 1. X is positive. The X is positive. C is positive. I don't know why I'm saying X. C is positive. And if C is positive, what is it then? Horizontal translation. Yeah. Horizontal translation. C units right. And then if you have X plus C, that's actually the same as X minus negative C. Because remember the sign has a negative sign in it? So C is actually not positive here. C is negative because it'd be minus and minus. And that's why you're going left. So that's why this is a horizontal translation. C units left. We agree? Okay, so that's at the top of your page. I'm going to give you some examples to try. So I'm going to give you y equals f of x, and then I'm going to give you transforms to, and I'm going to give you a few examples. And I want you to state just the transformations. So y equals f of x transforms to y minus 3 equals f 2x plus 1. That's A. And what order do the transformations have to be stated in? Stretch, reflect, translate. Correct? We'll do the first one together. But b is also going to be up here. It's going to be y equals negative 3 f 2x plus 1. So we'll try these two together first, and I'm going to give you a few to try on your own. So, what's the very first thing I told you we need to check for before we can state any transformations? It's being y equals, and we have to have a what? A 1 in front of the x. A 1 in front of the x, it has to be y equals. Do you agree? So if I were me, I am me. If I were you and you were me, and I was making my summary, and you could use this towards your summary if you really wanted to. Certainly looks summary-ish. I would put down here, remember, always have the equation in y equals, and I must have a 1 in front of my x. Because the 1 in front of the x, honestly, is where people mess up. They forget that they don't have a 1 in front of their x, and they don't adjust it. And if you don't make it have a 1 in front of your x, everything will be correct, but your horizontal translation will be wrong. If you have a negative 1 in front, that's not good either. You need to have a positive 1 in front of your x. Okay? All right. So, this one, I need to add 3. So I have, do I have a 1 in front of my x? Is there a 1 right in front of my x? Yeah. And how do I know? I could put a 1 here, just to prove a point. So I have y equals f bracket 2, 1x plus 1. You don't need the 1 in front of the x. That's just proving a point. Plus 3. Okay. I always need an extra bracket here first. I always will go like this. If you want to start. If you need a highlighter, you can borrow one. I highlight this in a different color than this. There's a 1 here. Because everything in green affects the what? Everything in green affects the what? It affects the x's. It's just about the y-axis. That's where you can. So it affects the x's, correct? Everything outside of it affects the y's. We agree? So everything outside will be vertical stretches and vertical translations. Everything in the green will be horizontal stretches and horizontal translations. We agree? Right? Okay. So we start off with stretches. Are there any? Well, here I have a 1. Does that stretch anything? No, that's where the vertical stretch is sitting though, isn't it? There just isn't one. What about this one? That's a 2. It's with the x, so it's a horizontal. So we have a horizontal stretch by a factor of 1 over 2, because this is technically 2 over 1 currently, right? By a half. And because it's with the x, it's about the y-axis. Stretches, done. No vertical, wrote my horizontal. We agree? Reflections. So I look in front of the f. Is there a negative sign? No. In front of the x, is there a negative sign? No. So reflections, done. Check. That was easy. Right? Okay. So I don't have a bullet for reflections because I don't need to. Then I do translations. This back one here is in the red. So what kind of translation is it? It's a vertical translation. Three units up. It's always the same way. Our horizontal translations are always the opposite, right? So this one's x plus 1. So I'm not moving 1 to the right. I'm moving 1 to the left because it would be an x minus a negative 1. And the negative 1 makes it go left. So I have a horizontal translation. Because it's with the x, it's horizontal. Horizontal translation. One, which way? 1 unit left. And then I'm done. Wow. that one. Make sense?
It's dollars.
Boom, boom. You're all giving me the same look that you give him that you're giving me when I make laugh, joke, funny things. Oh, side note. What do we do?
Make sure there's y equals and
See, this is why he's saying the lefty box. Yes. Make sure that it's in y equals and that there's a 1 in front of the x. What's our problem?
There isn't a 1 in front of
There isn't a 1 in front of the x. So we have to take out a GCF, a greatest common factor of 2. Because you just take out whatever the heck's here, because it needs to be a 1, right? So if it's a 2, you take out a 2. If it's a half, you have to take out a half. If it's a 7, you take out a 7. Whatever it is, because you need to have a 1 in front of there, correct? So we're going to have y equals negative 3f. And then you take a 2 out. 2 out of 2x is just an x, which is what you need, 1x. When you take a 2 out of 1, what are you left with? 1/2. Write it as 1/2, don't write it as 0.5, you're in grade 12. And you're in 30-1. I believe in you. You can write a half. Now is it in a format of which we can use? Yes. So this is the first step you have to do every single time. Because what happens is people will come back from the test and they'll get a 70 because they didn't do this at all the whole time. They knew their stuff backwards and forwards. They knew to flip the B. They knew to write it correct, everything. They just forgot to take and make sure there was a 1 in front of the X, and then every single time your horizontal translation's wrong. And the common error to you not taking that out will be there every single time. It just is. Okay? So I'm going to underline the X stuff in green. And the other stuff in red. There has to not be anything at the back. I could put a +0, but is there a point to doing that? No. Don't waste your time. So, what do we have to start off with? Search. So, stretches. Does it matter if I list the vertical or the horizontal first? No, it just needs to be stretches. I always do vertical. I don't know why. It's just a habit. Probably because I'm going from left to right. But do I have a vertical stretch? Do I have a vertical stretch? Yeah. It's whatever's in front of the F, correct? That's my vertical stretch. Can my vertical stretch ever be negative? Does the negative stretch it at all? No, the negative causes it to reflect in the x-axis, correct? So if you ever have vertical stretch by a factor of negative something, you won't pick that one. It doesn't make sense. So we have a vertical stretch by a factor of...
We have to flip out.
No, which one do we flip only?
Yeah.
The X one. Okay. Vertical stretch by a factor of 3 about the x-axis. Yeah. Anything in the red on the outside is going to be about the x-axis. Anything in green on the inside is going to be about the y, because it affects the x's. And if you reflect on the y, it's your x is going to go over here and then over here. So it's about the opposite. So this is about the x-axis. Is there a horizontal stretch? By a factor of what? 1/2. And it's not because of this half, it's because this is 2/1 and we always flip it. When you go from equation to words or mapping, you flip it. Words are mapping to equation, you flip it, right? Words and mapping are the same. So if this is a factor of a half, I'm going to have a half in my mapping because they're the same thing. Horizontal stretch by a factor of a half about the y-axis. Do I have any reflections? Yes, I have a -3 in the front, right? So I have a negative in the front. So it's with the y's that are being negated. So if a y's up here, it's down here. If a y's down here, it's up here now. So what axis am I reflecting on? The x-axis. And it's always about the x because it affects the y's. So it's a reflection in the x-axis. Translations, do I have any? I have a vertical translation? No, because there's no number at the back. Do I have a horizontal? Yeah. It's a half to the and humble. 1/2 units left. Below this, we're going to do its mapping. So, because I want to drive home that the numbers you use in words are going to be the numbers that appear in mapping. So in the first one here, I have a 1/2, a 3, and a 1. So I'm going to have a 1/2, a 3, and a 1 in mapping. I'm not going to flip anything. I'm not going to switch anything. I'm not going to make anything different signs or anything like that. Okay? So, my mapping is X, Y. Now remember, reflections and stretches do what operation? Multiply. And translations do what? Add or subtract. Right? Okay. So we have a horizontal stretch. Now remember, anything in the green here is going to affect my X, correct? So when I take this 2 out, I'm going to multiply by it. But what am I going to multiply by? A 1/2. 1/2. It's the same number as here, right? Horizontal stretch by a half factor of 1/2. My mapping is a 1/2. Then I have an X. Then I need to move 1 left. How am I going to do that? -1. That's how I move a point left, is by minusing 1. Now my Y's, do I have it multiplying by anything? Nope. But I am going to do what to it? Add 3 because there's a vertical translation 3M. And I say this every single semester, and I'll say it to you too, to you guys as well. If you're second guessing whether you should put a plus or a minus or multiply or not, the test is going to go horribly. Because every single common error is there. You can't be at all in the guessing. You can't be like, is it about the X or about the Y? If it's like that, you're done. Because it could go either way, because you could guess wrong. So you need to know your stuff backwards and forwards. So horizontal stretch, you flip when you take it out of the equation, right? And it's about the y-axis. And you need to know all those things backwards and forwards. If you're still guessing before the test, it's a scary situation for me. And you. Okay. So if we do mapping, this one's x, y. My x, I have a horizontal stretch by a factor of a 1/2, so I'm going to multiply by a 1/2. Does the reflection affect the x or the y? It's a reflection in the x-axis, and it's with the y here, isn't it? So I'm going to go 1/2 x, and then I need to move it 1/2 left. So minus a 1/2. And then my y's, I'm going to multiply by -3y. Am I going to do anything else? Is there anything else affecting my y? No. So basically, you multiply by the flip of this, and then do the opposite of this for mapping, because it's beautiful words, and then multiply by that. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 new ones. You're going to give me the transformations of the 2 new equations and the mapping. So do the transformations first, see that you practice it enough, then try the mapping, okay? See. Let's go through and just set up the equations just in case you have to change your numbers. So this one I have to subtract the 2. So I'm going to get y equals -4f. Then I have to do what? Take out GCF of the 2. So I'm going to get 1x plus 1 minus 2. Most people will do that one correctly. B is done worse. I know the moment that I make your B value actually be a fraction, your horizontal translation is often wrong. So let's see what we get. So we're going to do y equals -f. I get a 1/2. And then I get x plus what? It's 2. Most people will tell me it's a 1/2. Remember, You're not, if, in order for that to be a half, you'd have to divide by, or multiply by a half. You're not multiplying by half, you're dividing by it. So technically you have 1 divided by a half. That's when you take a GCF out, which is 1 times 2 over 1. So you flip and multiply. So it's actually 2. So this is x plus 2 minus 4. So when you take the half out, it actually ends up multiplying this number by 2. Because you're dividing by a half, which is like multiplying by 2. And make sure that whenever you take the GCF out, you double check if you're right by pretending to distribute it back. So if I go to C and I distribute this 2 back in, I get 2x plus 2. Boom. Same thing, right? So I'm going to check this one if I distribute it right. If I put a half in, I'm going to get a half x, and a half times 2 is 1. What if you would have had a half there? What's a half times a half? A quarter. That's not right. So always, once you take your GCF out, before you move on and do all your work, pretend distribute it back in and see if you get your original equation back. Because if you don't, you made an oopsie. Okay? So try these ones out. Keep going. If you did mess up that x plus 2, just change your number. Do I have any stretches? Yeah. The moment I have a 4 sitting in front and a 2 sitting in front, I have stretches in both directions. So I have a vertical stretch by a factor of 4, not negative 4, because the negative is a reflection, by a factor of 4 about the x-axis. I have a horizontal stretch by a factor of what? Yep, because it's a 2 over 1, right? I'm going to flip it. I have 1/2 about the y-axis. And it's like I said, if every single time you're having to go look at the cheat sheet to know if it's about the x or y, and you're going into the test like that, that's scary because you won't have the cheat sheet, right? You need to be able to do it all without that. Do I have any reflections? Yeah, I have a negative in front here, so it's going to affect my y's, so it's a reflection in the x-axis. And then translations, I have a vertical translation. It's -2, so it's going to be 2 units down. And a horizontal, I don't need that. Horizontal translation, 1 unit left. Then my mapping, my x, y becomes, so everything in here affects my x. So I'm horizontally stretching by a factor of a half. So I'm going to multiply by a half. Because what I say I do, that's mapping in words. Remember? Same thing. So I get a half x, and then I need to move it left 1. So I'm going to -1. And then I need to vertically stretch by 4. It's a reflection in the x, so it's actually going to be multiplied by -4y. And then I need to move it 2 units down. B, we don't have a vertical stretch, but we have a horizontal stretch. It's this one. Horizontal stretch by a factor of not a half, but by a factor of 2 about the y-axis because it's horizontal. I have no vertical stretch because there's no number in front. My negative is sitting in front here, so that's a reflection in the x-axis. My translations, I have a vertical translation four units down. Because it's actually what it is, so it's -4, it's 4 units down. And then I have a horizontal translation 2 units. Which way? Left. Oops, did not mean to do that. Then my mapping, my xy becomes, this affects my x's. So I multiply by 2y and subtract 2, because I always do the opposite of what's the x. 2y minus 2. And then my y's I'm going to, that's an x, not a y. 2x minus 2. And then my y's I'm going to go negative y minus 4. If I ask you to move a coordinate now, or I ask you to move a graph, is it hard? As long as your mapping's not wrong, you plug your coordinate in there, plug it in for your x's and y's and get an answer, correct? So the hardest part is not messing up your mapping. Okay? Your homework is online already. Page 38, 2, 3, and 7. Number 7 is a one just like this. Words and mapping. There's quite a few of them. And it's because you need practice. Yeah?
Wait, why is it minus y for base reflection?
Because there's a minus y.
Oh, okay.
There's a reflection. So whatever's in front of here, Sean, you multiply your y by.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if there's a reflection, you have to multiply by negative y. Negative 1y. Yeah.
Oh wait, no, it's negative. I didn't see it. Sorry.
Oh, this little one? Yeah.